Anthony Wayne was a general during the Revolutionary War that struck fear into his British enemies. For today's menu, I'm preparing a turkey, turnips, and pork belly stew, a noodle casserole, and braised beef ribs. All for a taste of history. Wow, spectacular. For the first menu in tribute of General Anthony Wayne, I'm making a turkey, parsnip, rutabaga, and pork belly stew. I got inspired because I know turkeys travel in flocks of up to 5,000. And the woods around Paoli were full of turkeys, that size and even bigger. This happens to be a 48-pounder. Imagine how big they got. So for the first step right now, I'm going to cut this turkey's breast off. Right here, follow the breast, bone down. I got a Dutchie getting super hot behind me. There we go. If you have to feed a lot of people, you make it very small. If you don't have to feed too many people, you can make bigger chunks. And I leave the skin right on them. Cut about in pieces like so. There we go. And that's about enough I need, not much more than that. So we get some salt in here, good amount. A little pepper. Just a little white pepper on that. Keep it. All right. Now I'm going to put the schmaltz into the Dutchie. Nice and hot. I just want the turkey to be lightly sauteed, not too much color. So the onion goes in now. Onion and the garlic. So remember, I don't want much color on that because it's basically a light kind of a ragu or stew. Turnips is what's going to be the binder for the turkey stew. Turnip will completely disintegrate. It's not difficult to understand. Getting flour in the 18th century wasn't an easy task. You had to go traveling to a mill, bring the flour home. Many times it didn't maintain very well. So it makes sense that people understood the importance of turnip vis-a-vis flour to make this particular dish. I have some freshly pulled thyme, and off it goes to the fire. I'm topping it off with a turkey stock or chicken stock. Quick stir right now. Make sure it doesn't sit up to the bottom. Oh, beautiful. All right. Now the rutabaga will be more firm than the turnips. So however you want to cut it is however you want to see it later. So ideally, I think a coarse dice might be the right thing to do, like so. I'm going to lid the stew in a little bit. Let it sit next to the fire to absorb the heat and let it simmer away. And it takes about 30 minutes to 40 minutes for the turnip to disintegrate. The turnip is the base, the rutabaga will be identifiable later. Some people also put potatoes into it. I let potatoes out because I'm serving this with a noodle casserole in a bit. 10 minutes or so, and then lid it and set it right next to the fire. And then, as you know, my pots absorb the heat. And it's going to be done when the other two recipes are completed. Mad Anthony Wayne was not a madman. He was a disciplined leader that bravely guided his troops to battle.
Born into a family lineage of military distinction, General Anthony Wayne possessed a fierce temper and an aggressive approach on the battlefield. His tactics would draw the ire of critics, but also the respect and praise of his supporters, among them General George Washington.
One of the similarities between General Washington and Anthony Wayne was that they were both enraptured with military precision and military history, and they both were very, very aggressive.
Wayne was a hothead. There's no doubt about it. Every time they would hold a council of war, when they asked Wayne's opinion on what to do, and his answer was fight.
Wayne's critics would contend that his characteristic impulsiveness on the battlefield left the Americans vulnerable to a surprise attack by British troops at the Battle of Paoli. Wayne's approach, temper, and intolerance for insubordination gave rise to Mad Anthony Wayne. As Brigadier General, Wayne commanded the Pennsylvania Continental Line. Most notably, his leadership shined at the crucial battles of Stony Point, Brandywine, and Monmouth. In fact, it was Wayne's role at Monmouth that helped Washington secure his first major victory in the War of Independence.
Wayne was quite a disciplinarian, so when his men were in combat, they were pretty tough. They are some of the best troops in Washington's army.
Following the Revolutionary War, Anthony Wayne played a critical role in securing what is now the Midwest territories of the U.S. His victory over resistant American Indian tribes at the Battle of Fallen Timbers resulted in a treaty that would open the door for westward expansion. Wayne's family home in Paoli, Pennsylvania, was occupied by descendants of the family until 1965 and stands today as a National Historic Landmark.
Here in Paoli, Pennsylvania, just a few miles from Valley Forge, General Anthony Wayne was born into a wealthy family and this magnificent estate.
This room, where we're standing right now, was originally the house where Anthony Wayne grew up. He and his parents and his two sisters.
So they all lived in this?
They all lived in this one little space.
Amazing, huh?
Anthony Wayne was a surveyor as a young man after he finished his education.
It's amazing the parallel between like him or even George Washington, who also started off as a surveyor.
Well, Chef, this is the formal parlor at Waynesboro, and this room would have been used for entertaining guests.
It's beautiful, appointed.
And as you can see, General Wayne is still looking down upon us, right there above the fireplace. That is a reproduction portrait that was done of General Wayne after the Treaty of Greenville was signed. Washington badly wanted that territory opened for U.S. settlement, and that's why he recommissioned Anthony Wayne to end the hostilities.
You need to be complimented. You have so well maintained this building, because after all, it's a window to the past, which everybody should partake in it. The next recipe I make, and I found very interesting with my research, it's what we call a 17th century mac and cheese. Interesting. And it's really heavily known in the Pennsylvania Dutch community. So I'm sure that made Anthony Wayne at his home maybe or maybe have not had it a few times. All it is a pasta dough, and you roll out the pasta dough with a little flour on my board. I'll take some of the ready-made pasta dough I have, which is a very simple, nothing more than flour, egg, oil. Now this is the tricky part. You don't want to make this as fine as a regular noodle that you buy in the store. And so now I'm just going to apply some pressure on here. Roll it out. There we go. Whatever width you want. All right. When you make that, you want to let them dry, ideally, so you make it the night before, a couple hours before. It's easier to handle, but you don't have to. You can also straight from here put it in your boiling water. My noodles that I already have done before, I'm adding in some oil. And that's what's important, that the oil is in there. The oil prevents them from sticking. So now we're going to bring this to a boil. Now those won't take much longer to cook than any store-bought pasta. Maybe 5 to 6 minutes thereabout, not much more than that. If you try to make this recipe, just don't undercook them. That's beautiful. Look at those, gorgeous. Now, In Pennsylvania Dutch, they call them dumplings, they don't call them noodles. Put them in my pan. Now I want to add the bacon into it. You can use bacon, you could use ham, or you have to use anything for that matter. So here we go. Nutmeg and some parsley. A feast for my eyes already. Good amount of nutmeg. All right, my eggs. This recipe here, I'd say about 14, 15 eggs for sure. Can put any kind of cheese on it, but in the end I like Gruyere on top. Nice, real imported Gruyere. It dates back to the same time as this recipe. And the Gruyere will give this unbelievable flavor. Let me check out my beehive. Wow, look at perfect. And let me get my mac and cheese, 18th century style. Slide it in here. Like I said, maybe 8 to 10 minutes max until the eggs are cooked and the cheese is melted. One of the bloodiest battles during the Revolutionary War gave way for America's first battle cry. Remember Paoli.
In September of 1777, more than 2 years into the Revolution, Washington was in desperate need of a victory. He'd ordered General Anthony Wayne and his troops to cut off British supply lines along the Schuylkill River outside of Philadelphia. Wayne surveyed the position of the British and insisted in letters to Washington that they take this opportunity to strike. Characteristic of his aggressive tendencies, he set up camp only 2 miles from the British forces.
Anthony Wayne's a daredevil. The British light infantry couldn't wait to hit these guys because basically Wayne is tempting them by being this close. And sure enough, they're going to launch this night attack and they're going to swat them real hard.
Ensuring the element of surprise, the British forces advanced through the night with flintless firearms intended to prevent any misfire that would expose the ambush.
The British troops were silent until they got right up to the camp, and then General Gray came to the head of the column and shouted, "Dash, light infantry," and responded with a cheer that made the woods echo. It was not just a normal battle. They set the camp on fire, they bayoneted every guy they came up with. Some of the men refused to come out of their huts and were burned alive. The shrieks and groans and clashes and the sounds of this were absolutely terrifying. This becomes known as the Paoli Massacre. Some of the American accounts claim they heard British troops shouting, "No quarters, no prisoners."
That night would leave an indelible impression on those that managed to survive.
Was it a massacre in the sense that everybody got killed? No, most of Wayne's force got away. But there were atrocities. There were American soldiers here killed after they had surrendered.
The brutality of the actions at the Battle of Paoli would provide American forces with an unrelenting desire to vanquish the acts of the British. Wayne would apply the lessons from the defeat at Paoli to his own daring nighttime raid. An elite force led by Wayne emulated the British tactics of stealth movements with a silent, flintless attack on the heavily defended British compound at Stony Point.
His men were told to scale Stony Point. It's about a 200-foot climb. They came over the parapets, they're shouting, "Remember Paoli." Apparently those British troops panicked right away, knowing what that meant, and they surrendered.
Unlike the events at Paoli, the surrendering British troops were shown mercy, setting up an ideal that would carry on into the soon-to-be-established nation.
You have established the national character of our country. You have taught our enemies that bravery, humanity, and magnanimity are the national virtues of the Americans.
The noodle casserole is in the beehive, and now I'm just going to concentrate quick and show you my way of doing the most unbelievable short rib that you've ever had. So the short ribs I got, take a look at those. This is what we call prime short ribs. Prime because it has all the marbling, it cooks much faster. Actually, those short ribs here don't take more than about 25 minutes at about 4 1/4, believe it, because there's just so much fat in there. So all I do, I want to cut down. Look at the marbling, that's what I was talking about, look at that. Actually, I think it's even more flavor in there than in the steak. All I have now is a good amount of salt. Salt on it. Notice also that I let them sit outside a little bit. I like them to get dry, air dry, which those ones are. Good amount of pepper. A bit more on the other side. And then I got a dachi getting hot in the back. And I got some oil here. You could use schmaltz, you could use anything, but oil for me works the best on this one. Searing until they're nice and brown on both sides, about 5 minutes each side at least, until they're nice caramelized and browned. And then I add a mûrboy into it, which is basically carrots, onions, celery, deglaze with red wine, put a lid on it. At home, you stick it back in your oven until they're cooked. Like I said, those are prime, they don't take long to cook. And then later, I make a sauce with shallots, beef marrow, red wine. Brown them up nice, just like that. There we go. And another 8 minutes at high heat before you put it back in the oven. So the ribs behind me are what I call caramelizing, both sides of this beautiful prime short ribs. Now I get some mûrboy, which is basically celery, onion, carrots. But anything will work or nothing would work too. You don't even have to add anything into it. Deglaze with red wine, put it back in the oven and wait until the rib pulls back from the bone, about 1 inch. When you see the bone pulling out, done. So now I put this in there. And the red wine comes next. It's very important to use a dry burgundy. Let me see. Oh yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. All right, now we're going to start finishing the turnip and rutabaga. Gosh, look at that. The turnips are disintegrated, and the rutabaga, the way I cut them, stays whole. That's the beauty of the dish. Unbelievable flavor comes out of this pot, but now comes what makes it the pièce de résistance. And that is that I have some pork belly that I slow roasted. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to cut the pork belly into generous chunks like so. Tell you what, Met Anthony Wayne had this for his troops. Nobody would beat him. It just don't get better than that. Like so. All I would add now is some parsley on top. Maybe a nice sprig of thyme on the side. And here you got it. Turkey, turnips, rutabaga, and slow roasted pork belly. Feast for a king. Dr. Staib, it's such a pleasure and so much anticipated to have a lunch with you here in this beautiful spring house that dates back to 1745 at the General Warren Inn.
Thank you very much for having me.
In my tavern, which opened in 1773, they were plotting the revolution. But here, so close to the Paoli battlefield, was a different story. They actually were in it.
Yes, taverns are much more than just a place where you get something to eat and drink. And in this case, of course, this being a loyalist stronghold, on the way to the Paoli battlefield, British forces picked up all civilians out of their houses where they were to make sure that the news of the approaching British would not spread.
If you're planning a surprise attack, you want it to be a surprise.
Yeah, Paoli is certainly a low point in Wayne's career. He is surprised, he loses 53 dead. The high point comes 2 years later at Stony Point. It's not only a high point in a military point of view, but also an opportunity to show the world we fight a very different war. We fight the war it is supposed to be waged, where you grant quarter to people who surrender, etc. And that's where Americans use Paoli as a way to define themselves.
But doctor, anybody that knows me knows I love tea. I'm a big tea drinker. But the connection between the one envy here and this tea is a unique story, I should say.
The connection is in the name, of course, Sir Earl Grey tea, named after the son of Wayne's opponent, Sir Charles Grey, who led the attack at the Battle of Paoli.
Anybody that drinks a cup of Earl Grey should remember the sacrifice that went on here, huh?
Yeah, just don't drink a toast to Sir Charles, which would not go over too well in this neighborhood, even after 200 years.
To the Americans, of course.
Well, in that case, I drink with you.
And Bob, I want to thank you very much. It was an enlightening lunch right here in the spring house dating back to 1745.
My pleasure.
Thanks. My Pennsylvania Dutch noodle casserole should be ready by now. Let me go check the beehive and serve it up. Oh, yeah. Oh. Now that is what I'm talking about. Matter of fact, I could eat this whole entire pan myself because I love it so much. Oh, oh, unbelievable. The flavor of the pasta, the bacon, the egg, the cheese, especially the Gruyere, it don't get better than that. A little parsley on top. And now comes the pièce de résistance for Mad Anthony Wayne, which is the short rib that I braised with vegetables and wine. I'm finishing a little sauce with shallots and bone marrow and serve it up. I'm taking some bone marrow, got to pull them out of the bone. Now those bones obviously you wouldn't discard. It makes a beautiful stock. And bone marrow, all of this is really fat. Like this unique flavor of the fat that makes it so good. Okay, got a spider getting hot behind me. Butter here. Let the butter melt. Shallots. So the shallots I just want translucent. Then I'm adding the beef marrow. Now we let this wilt it. You got to be careful when you cook with marrow, because marrow is basically nothing else than fat. So if you cook it too much, it disappears completely. If you want it still visible in a sauce, like a sauce bordelaise, which I'm doing an abbreviated form of, you want to be careful. So I want to make sure I deglaze it before the marrow is completely gone. And the whole trick of this dish is the flavor that the marrow brings along with it. Deglaze with a little bit of red wine, need more than that. And now comes the world famous brown sauce. You see how nice you see the marrow still? Take a taste of that. Oh, power, real power. And I think in the 18th century, people loved marrow and oxtail and anything because they sort of give you strength from the animal. It is beautiful. Let's check on those ribs. Oh, gosh, look at them. When the bone gets exposed, it means it's absolutely beautiful already. Beautiful and tender. It's ready to fall off the bone. My sauce is ready. This is the marrow that you see. And all we're going to do, give it a nice lick of sage. A little chive on top. And a little bit of parsley on the rim. Mr. Anthony Wayne, I know you did a lot for our country. So did I today. I made you this spectacular meal. I know you the both of. So we have a Turkish stew for you with turnips and rutabaga and braised pork belly. We have the Pennsylvania Dutch noodle casserole that is done with the Pennsylvania Dutch noodles. And we have the pièce de résistance, the beautiful prime short ribs finished in a shallot, red wine, marrow sauce. General Anthony Wayne, remember Paoli and remember this spectacular meal that we prepared for you all for a taste of history.